They say there's no proof. That you're crazy for believing. But monsters are real. All over the United States, there's a legend surrounding a mysterious door in the woods that acts as a barrier to keep an alleged monster with brutish instincts from running rampant. This story was shared on a forum dedicated to monster sightings. Out of respect for the dead, the events remain unchanged. "Do it now!" Bo screamed. The heavy wooden door stood before us, menacing and imposing, with the warning "Beware" carved into the face of it. A heavy iron chain attached to an equally heavy iron lock secured the door so that it couldn't be opened. Bo's punch had my nose bleeding onto the iron lock. "I want you to knock on the door, and then say it." Bo and his cronies had me cornered. I couldn't run anywhere. The other two kids, Bo's partners in crime, less physically mature than him, closer to my size, though both were still a head taller than I was. In my hand was my Birch figure, a figure made of sticks that my mom had fashioned from twine and twigs from a birch tree. My mother had given it to me before she passed. "Carry this with you," she would tell me, "and say the words. She'll come." My mom never told me who she was. "Now!" Bo pushed me again, so hard this time that I dropped my Birch figure, but not before I whispered the words my mom taught me. "For thee who makest me, I will come. He who breaks me shall come undone." I was terrified. Everyone in town knew about the door, but we thought that it was just a tall tale. Ask 100 people in town about the door in the woods. You'll get 100 different stories about where it was, how to open it, and the whereabouts of the legendary one-armed girl. But as different as those stories about the door were, every version had the same message. The door was meant to stay locked. Bo and his cronies were quiet as I recited the chant they forced me to say. I nervously finished the chant. "Brood, go back in your hole and spare the living one more soul." We all stood quiet for what felt like minutes, waiting for something to occur. I broke the silence. "Were you expecting someone would knock back, Bo?" I asked incredulously. His friend broke out in a fit of laughter after hearing the zinger I had sent at the man-boy. I may have even laughed myself, but I think it was more in relief that the door, in fact, had just been a tall tale. Bo, on the other hand, didn't find my snark amusing, and his idea of a retort usually involved violence. He landed another solid fist into my nose. I flopped onto the forest floor, then dragged my limp body up against the base of a tree. I had dropped my Birch figure and was reeling from Bo's ham-hock hand. But then, to our surprise, we heard a click and rustling clatter of iron against wood. The lock had popped open, and the chain had come undone. The door in the woods had opened. As the four of us waited with bated breath to see what was on the other side. It did not emerge slowly, but instead it arrived thunderously. This hulking thing, this grotesque, monstrous brute, burst from the doorway with a furious rage. He was a mass of sickly yellow flesh, tall, lean, and ready to kill. Its face was featureless aside from a massive shark-toothed mouth and a strange rune etched into its forehead. It tackled Bo to the ground. He started to cry, squealing out for his mommy over and over again until the thing tore out his throat. After that, he could only manage the occasional gurgle. His friends retreated, but I was too dizzy to get up and follow. The creature gnawed at Bo until his corpse was unrecognizable, and when it was done with him, it turned its sights on me. I quickly reached for my Birch figure. I couldn't move out of fear. The creature closed the distance between us with a step and then leapt towards me. I shut my eyes and prepared for death. But death never came. When I opened my eyes, I I was looking at not one monster, but two. This new monster was standing between the brute and myself. It was a tall, powerful, living birch tree with ghastly human features. I tried to make sense of who or what it actually was. The brute circled the birch, but the birch quickly swatted it to the ground with a heavy wooden arm. The brute yelped like a wounded dog and scrambled back to its feet. It lunged at me, but once again the new creature knocked it to the ground. There was a flurry of strikes, blows from both sides. The first lit up the cries of evil incarnate as they scratched and clawed one another. Black blood and bark covered the forest floor. Skin torn from the brute and splinters scratched from the birch. After trading blows and deafening screams, the two monsters backed off without taking their eyes off each other. They were equal foes. But then the brute charged and leapt into the air at the birch. Its jaws were wide open with intent on crushing whatever it caught. The birch quickly reacted to the oncoming attack with an ear-piercing roar and swept at the brute with such force it knocked the monster's beaks back into the hellhole it came from. The brute was in its hole and getting back up for another attack. I had to do something to protect my protector. It was my turn to be brave, so I quickly picked up the lock and forced my weight against the door. I fastened the heavy chain on the door and worked quickly to snap the iron lock to keep this wretched monster's brute behind the door in the woods. By the time all was said and done, exhaustion had finally caught up to me. I stood up and held my head in my hands. I could not believe the magnitude of what I had just witnessed. Monsters. Real monsters fighting. When I turned around to thank the birch tree, it was nowhere to be seen, hidden amongst all the other trees surrounding this door in the woods.
Watch new vids every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, only on Crypt TV.